Hi, it's Greg. I'm going to talk about the life history of Al Capone. Al Capone was born in Brooklyn, New York on January 17, 1899 to Italian immigrants, parents Gabriel and Teresa Capone. His father worked as a barber and his mother worked as a seamstress. His parents came to the United States by ship in 1893. Al had eight siblings: Vincent, or known as Richard Hart, Raphael, Salvatore, Ermina, who died at age 1, Ermino, Albert, Matthew, and Mafalda. Al went to a parochial Catholic school. He was expelled from school at the age of 14 for hitting a female teacher in the face. He played semi-professional baseball from 1916 to 1918. While he was a teenager, Capone was influenced by Johnny Torrio, a gangster whom he looked up to as a mentor. At the age of 19, Capone married May Josephine Coughlin. They had a son named Albert Francis, or known as Sonny Capone. Growing up in New York, Capone was involved with the following small-time gangs: Junior 40 Thieves, Bowery Boys, Brooklyn Rippers, and the Five Points. In his late teens, he worked at the Harvard Inn. One day he insulted a woman and her brother, slashed Capone in the face 3 times. This is how he got the name Scarface. In 1919, Capone moved to Chicago from New York. He worked as a bouncer. In 1923, Capone bought a house in the city's south side known as the Park Manor neighborhood. While in Chicago, Capone teamed up with Johnny Torrio. Torrio headed the largest Italian organized crime group in which Capone was his right-hand man. Capone was involved with the bootleggers during Prohibition in the United States. In January 1925, Torrio was shot coming back from a trip. Due to his injuries, Torrio made Capone the head of the organization. Capone was 26 during this time. The organization took in illegal breweries and a transportation network to Canada. Capone enlisted local members of the black community into his operations. He was known for his suits, cigars, gourmet food, and female companionship. He also owned numerous types of costly jewelry. Using bribery and widespread intimidation, he based his operations in Cicero, Illinois, to take over the town's council election. This made it hard for the Northsiders gang to target him. On September 20th, 1926, the Northsiders gang opened fire outside the Capone headquarters at the Hawthorne Inn. Capone was not hurt during the ambush. In 1928, Capone bought a house in Palm Island, Florida from Clarence Bush. Clarence was part of the Anheuser-Busch family. On February 14, 1929, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred. On the morning of Valentine's Day, a Cadillac sedan pulled up in front of a storage facility in the Chicago neighborhood of Lincoln Park. 4 men got out of the car. 2 of them were dressed in a police uniform. The 4 men entered the building and told 7 men to line up against the wall. Then the 7 men were shot execution style. 5 of the men were from the George Bugs Moran's Northside gang, and 2 others were affiliates. It was assumed Capone ordered the massacre from his Florida home. The motive of the murders was to eliminate Bugs Moran, the head of the Northside gang. Also, Moran claimed Capone's dog track in the Chicago suburbs, and several saloons were in his territory. Moran was not one of the victims since he got the other to the location after the shooting. On March 27, 1929, Capone was arrested by the FBI. He was charged with contempt of court for faking an illness to avoid an earlier court appearance in Chicago, Illinois. Then on May 16, 1929, he was arrested in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for carrying a concealed weapon. On May 17, 1929, he was indicted by a grand jury and was sentenced to prison for 1 year. On August 8, 1929, he was transferred to the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. He was released from prison in March 1930. Then he was placed on the unofficial Chicago Crime Commission as the #1 public enemy. Capone's organization was linked to the murder of Julius Rosenheim in February 1930. Rosenheim served as a police informant in the Chicago outfit for 20 years. Again, Capone was arrested in April 1930 on vagrancy charges when visiting Miami Beach. He claimed the Miami police refused him food and water and threatened to arrest his family. On October 17, 1931, Capone was convicted on 5 counts of income tax evasion and was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. In May 1932, he was moved to the Atlanta U.S. Penitentiary at the age of 33. As he arrived at the prison, he was diagnosed with syphilis and gonorrhea. While he was in prison, he stitched soles on shoes. Then in August 1934, he was moved to Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in San Francisco, California. On June 23, 1936, Capone was stabbed by a fellow inmate. While he was in prison, Capone played the banjo and was part of the prison band the Rock Islanders. While serving his sentence, Capone was diagnosed with neurosyphilis, which put him in the hospital section of the prison. On January 6, 1939, Capone was transferred to the Federal Correctional Institution at Terminal Island, California. Capone was paroled from prison on November 16, 1939, and referred to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland for paresis. Johns Hopkins Hospital did not want him, so he was referred to Union Memorial Hospital. On March 20th, 1940, Capone left the hospital for his home in Palm Island, Florida. In 1942, Capone was one of the first Americans to be given the new drug penicillin for treatment for his illness. In 1946, a Baltimore psychiatrist and physician concluded that Capone had the mentality of a 12-year-old. He spent the rest of his life in his mansion on Palm Island, Florida. He suffered a stroke on January 21st, 1947, then he contracted bronchial pneumonia. Then on January 22nd, 1947, he suffered a cardiac arrest. On January 25th, 1947, he died as a result of a heart attack. Capone's body was transported to Chicago where his funeral was held. He was buried in Mount Olivet Cemetery in Chicago. Then in 1950, his remains were moved to Mount Carmel Cemetery in Hillside, Illinois. His final resting spot is alongside his father and one of his brothers.